Hey guys, it's Tim, and I'm putting together a little video to show you how to do something extremely useful. We have been doing Module 3, which is our introduction to using frameworks. And in this module, we're learning some pretty interesting stuff. Let's take a quick look here. So here we are, and we've been using AngularJS as well as material design principles and Firebase for a real-time data backend that is letting us make this pretty cool user dashboard. And we've been working with a theme of like a store that shows you your items, and we're getting pretty far along with it. And the question that we get a lot is, how can I take what I've created and put it online at my own URL? So, so we're at this point where we're ready to take what we've created in CodePen and we want to move it over into a proper hosting solution, and we want to be able to put your own URL at it. So let me jump to a little example that I've put together here. Let me just bring it on up. And this is one of the storefronts that our student Salvador has been working on. And you can see he's got the login area working here and so forth. And this is no longer being hosted on CodePen. The URL is actually oddcastshow.com, which is an URL that I have kicking around from a show that I used to do. And so what I'm going to show you today is step by step how to take your stuff directly from CodePen and put it up online in hosting that is extremely robust, that won't cost you a penny to use, and that will allow you to hook up your own domain name to it. And this is pretty cool. And then along the way, we'll see how you can also still do updates to your site that is live, even though you want to keep working inside of CodePen because you get that nice visual environment for seeing your styling. So let's get down to it, shall we? Okay, so here we are inside a Basecamp that we're using for tracking this whole course. And Salvador has been following along with our Styling the Dashboard tutorial that Mike and I put up. And down here, he's posted a link to his pen. So let's take a look at what Salvador's been doing here. And here we go. So this is looking pretty nice. He's using some cues from material design. He's got some paper elements going on here, which have the nice little drop shadow around them. So I want to show you what is a very, very useful feature of CodePen. If you haven't used it before, take a look down here in the bottom right corner where we have this option called Export. And if I click it, it's going to give me a few options here. I'm going to select Export as a zip. So here we go, and that's downloading. And let's jump into that just through the regular browser, file browser here. And we'll crack into it here. And let me just rename this. So I got a lot of folders in my download area here. There we go. And there we are. So take a look at what CodePen has done for us, which is particularly nice. We've got an index.html, and it has automatically created a folder for our JavaScript as well as our CSS. And in the README file, if you take a quick look at that, it's actually giving us the original pen URL that this has come from, which could be pretty handy for us. Now, this is great because if we take a look back into CodePen again, right here we can see that, for convenience sake, the way CodePen works, we have this CSS box, we have this JavaScript box, and whatever we do is just going to automatically get applied if we're inside the CodePen environment. But now that we're moving out of the CodePen environment and we want to put this online somewhere, it needs a few little edits, but thankfully when we use that export option, CodePen has already done some of them for us. So let's crack open that HTML file and see what has been changed to make this process a little easier for us. Okay, so here we are inside the folder that we've gotten as a result of exporting the pen from CodePen. And I'm going to open up a text editor that I like a lot, which is called Sublime Text. It's a very popular editor. There we go. And let's just drag Salvador's HTML into Sublime so we can take a little look at what CodePen has done for us. Okay, so here, let's expand this a little bit. And I want to bring your attention to the CSS, first of all. This line is not inside of our pen on CodePen. What it's done is it has automatically inserted for us the link that we need to bring our style sheet into this version that can run outside of CodePen. And similarly, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom here, we can see that it has put a script tag in as well. And these paths are relative paths, and those correspond to the folders that it has provided for us. So inside of here, we see the JavaScript, and we see the CSS. And another thing that's nice is that it is giving us the processed version of the CSS and JavaScript. Now, what I mean by that, this is not something we've done a whole lot of yet, but inside of CodePen, you have options. So for instance, with your CSS here, you can turn on what they call a preprocessor, like that would allow you to do something like Sass or stylus. So these are variations on CSS that need to be processed through an application in order to produce the final CSS. Well, when you do an export, you're not getting the Sass version of your CSS. You're actually getting the full pre-compiled version of CSS, which is really helpful for us. Later on, we're going to see how we can make use of that fact. So jumping back into our folder here, this looks all pretty good to go, but I'm going to point out a couple of things that could catch you if you're not careful. Probably the number one problem that I see come up when people are making use of this is to deal with the URLs that are being used to bring in your JavaScript and so forth. Now, what you want to be careful about is that they all have either HTTPS as their beginning. What you don't want to have is HTTP. Maybe I'll, because this happens a lot, maybe what I'll do, Salvador's done this the right way, but I'm going to change this so that it is HTTP rather than HTTPS. So just so that you can see what happens when we actually go to take this into our hosting solution. So I'll save that. And if I just run this locally, we probably won't have any issue with this, but when we actually put it up online, we're going to see an issue. Let's see what happens if we just open this up locally here. I'll open it up in Chrome, and boom, it works perfectly, right? Which is great. Now, the reason why we're able to run this locally, even though we are not running a server or anything like that on our local machine, is that basically the way we're constructing these software, these tools, is that it's pretty much static files that we are using to create our application, and then we're counting on API-powered things like Firebase for all of the dynamic aspects of this. So it's really just HTML, JavaScript, and styles. There's no middleware like a PHP or something like that that we would need to install a server software for. Now, because of that, this opens up the range of options that we have available to us of where we can host this thing, because technically we don't even need server software to host this. We can, in fact, host it in a storage solution. So imagine something like Dropbox, for instance, or GitHub pages. Now, a lot of storage solutions behind the scenes are actually making use of something called Amazon S3, which is their scalable storage solution. SSS, S3. And so we're going to make use of basically the same technology that's used for things like Netflix and Dropbox to get this really, really robust hosting for this site. In addition to that, we're going to be able to do this without actually paying any money. If you're not going over, I believe it is 20,000 hits, 20,000 requests during the day, this won't cost you a cent to do, which is pretty fantastic. Now, you are going to need an Amazon account, but this is basically the same account that you would have used to order books or anything else off Amazon. So chances are you already have one. So let's bounce over into my Amazon account and I'll show you the two tools that we're going to be making use of. Amazon has a ton of great tools, but for today we're only going to need two of them. All right, so let me jump into aws.amazon.com and I'm going to log into my account, sign into the console right here. And in a second, here we go. So this is the full suite of Amazon Web Services that are available. The two that we're going to be making use of are this one, S3, and this other one called Route 53. And the difference between these two is that S3 is a storage solution. That's where we're going to actually upload our files to. And Route 53 is their name server solution. This has more to do with hooking up the domain name. Now you'll see if we don't need to hook up a domain name, then putting our stuff up in S3 is very, very easy. But if we do want to have a custom domain name like Oddcast and point it to our thing, that's where this second tool comes in. So let me jump into S3 and we can get familiar inside of here. All right, so in here I've got a bunch of what are called buckets. A bucket is basically a storage area for files, any kind of media files or HTML or what have you. And so I've previously set one up called Oddcast Show here. And if I go inside of it, you'll see that, you know, this is pretty familiar. I've got an index file, I've got a CSS folder and JavaScript folder. So let's go back to the main area for buckets. And I'm going to get rid of this so we can go step by step, because there's just a few settings that you need to know about to make this solution work. But we'll have this up and running before too long. Now over to the right, I'll point out that you also have something called properties here. Might want to have that open because we're going to be making a few edits to properties here when we create our bucket for storing our site, which is built on our pen that we've exported. So I'm going to delete this first off. So let me go up into the actions. And I'm going to say delete bucket. It'll give me a warning because basically the way that these bucket names work is it's actually very, very similar to a domain name in that your bucket name has to be unique to you. So for me, for instance, because I work for Oddly Studios, I'll often put the term Oddly in there somewhere, which lowers the chance that somebody else is using the exact same name that I'm using. So we get that warning because it basically says if you delete this, you know, at any time from this point forward, somebody else could grab this. Now that could have some implications to you because what we're trying to do is create a bucket name that matches the domain name that we're going to use. So because I want to use oddcastshow.com, I'm going to name my bucket oddcastshow.com as well. So you might want to check and see if the domain name that you want to use is actually available before you start doing this portion. If it's not and you need to change it, that's not a big deal either. You can always make a new bucket. It's pretty straightforward. But that's why we're getting this little warning here, and it's something to think about. All right, so back into here. Hopefully no one has taken this in the last few seconds. I'm going to say oddcastshow.com to delete, and waiting. Boom, it's gone. All right, so now right away, before this can get nabbed, I'm going to create a new bucket. I'm going to say oddcastshow.com. And this is interesting. We have the option to select a region. Now this is pretty useful because geographic location of your storage solution can actually have a pretty big impact on performance of serving up your site. So the nice thing with this type of solution is that if you are creating a site that is going to be popular elsewhere, like let's say you're studying in Toronto, but you're building something that is for people back home, and maybe there are closer to Tokyo or Sao Paulo or something like that, you can actually choose to have your stuff hosted geographically close to them, which lowers the amount of time that it takes for your site to be served up to them. It lowers the incidence of lost packets in between that have to be reserved and can slow down the performance of your site. It's a nice little feature to know about, and Amazon has like tons of ways that you can use this ability. We're not going to get into it too much today. I'm just going to pick a US standard because this is a very simple thing that I'm doing, but if you want to learn more about this, documentation is very good on the Amazon site. All right, so let's get back into it. And we're going to pick the US standard as my region and create the bucket. Okay, so there's my bucket back again. Now, if I click into it, it is empty. But for me to upload the files that we have right here is very straightforward. I'm going to go into Actions, and I'm not going to need to manually create the subfolders in here for my JavaScript and my CSS. In a second, you'll see that if you drag a folder in, it actually recognizes it and creates the folders for you, which is really nice. So I'm going to grab the index. I'm going to grab the JavaScript folder, the CSS folder, drag them on over here into the uploader. But there's a step we should do before we start the upload, and it has to do with security settings. So I'll show you the area that is important for us. We go into Set Details, and I'm just going to leave it with standard storage. That's totally fine. This is also the least expensive option. You've got a couple of other options. If you're going to be serving up something really robust, then or something that is rarely ever going to get called, then you can use the other options and it will change the pricing. But we're kind of doing a free thing right here anyway, so I'm not going to worry too much about that stuff right now. The main area I want to go to is Set Permissions, and what I'm going to do is check off Make Everything Public. Now this is important because as it is right now, before I check that off, I'm the only person who actually has access to this storage. Originally it's intended just for storing files, and so you didn't typically want to make things public. But now that we're going to be actually serving up these files as a website, we have to enable the public to load them. Otherwise they're not going to be able to view anything. By checking off this option here, we save ourselves having to go in and change the permissions for each file. So it's a handy little step. I recommend doing it. All right, back into our work here. So I'm going to go ahead and start the upload right here, and very quickly we see that our CSS, our JavaScript, and our index is there and ready to go. In fact, if I click on this index file right now, and I go over to the properties, we will see that there is already a URL for us here. Now I'm going to bring this up, but you'll start to see the problem that I've been mentioning here. So it's broken, right? And when we see these curly braces, we should be thinking, okay, so this is Angular not evaluating my expressions. I'm also not loading these images here, which is a bit of a problem. So the first thing we should do is take a look in our developer tools, and go to the console to see if there's any errors. And when we do, we see this error saying mixed content. The page was loaded over HTTPS, but required an insecure script. And if you're looking at it, you can see that this is where, you know, I set the URLs to HTTP rather than HTTPS. And that is now showing up as a problem here because if you notice, we are serving this up over a securely encrypted connection under HTTPS, which is good. That's what we want for a dashboard like this. But it means that that little problem we created for ourselves starts to show up now. So what I'm going to do is jump back into here, into Sublime, and I'm going to look for anywhere that I'm using HTTP and just fix it, put it back to the way Salvador had it in the beginning. There we go. By changing it to HTTPS. Now the other thing you could also do is just chop that right out entirely and serve it up just with the // but I'm not going, when you do it that way, basically what it's going to do for you then is use whatever the URL that you are at is using. So because it is HTTPS, now that we're on Amazon, it would automatically insert an HTTPS. So it's a nice trick to make it compatible whether you're using a secure connection or not using a secure connection. I'm not going to do it in this case because I also want to be able to run this site off of my local drive as well. And the // doesn't really work when you are serving it as a file from your local file system. So for my use, I'm going to make it HTTPS manually inside of here, but you can do it whichever way that you wish. If you're not going to be working off your local desktop, then you might as well go to starting it with the // All right, back into our example here, and we are changing all the HTTP into the HTTPS right there. I think I've probably got another one right up here. Let's change that up as well. So these are all of our JavaScript links. So our stuff wasn't evaluating basically because we weren't actually loading in Angular anywhere. This looks pretty good. So I'm going to give that a save. And now I'm going to replace it inside of S3 by going back into my console here. And I'm already selected on this index.html. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. Get the confirmation. Yep, we're going to delete it. And now I will re-upload just the HTML file that I have fixed up. Let's move it on into here. And just to be on the safe side, it should remember my security sessions, my permissions. But every once in a while I found that when I'm replacing a file, it doesn't remember it. So I'm just going to check off to make everything public again and start the upload. And in a second, there is our index file. And let's go to the properties again. And let's see what happens if we visit it now. So I'm going to open that up in a new tab. We take a look at it and boom. All right, so now we're working. Right? We've got our dynamic data and all of our expressions are evaluating. We can go in here and we can, search the purchases that Bob has been doing. He's bought some mustaches. He's bought some finger-looking chicken. I would buy more chicken if I was him. $3? That's a good deal. All right. So this is all great, but if you'll notice, this URL is a little unusual looking. And, chances are you're going to want to start putting stuff in your own URL. So to do this, you would have had to have bought a domain name somewhere. I'm going to show you the solution that I use for purchasing domain names, and we'll talk a little bit about why you can see such a large variation in pricing when you're buying domain names. I can talk about that a little bit and show how I do it. But before we get to that step, we're going to jump into that second tool that we are using from AWS, from the Amazon Web Services, which is called Route 53. So this is where we set up our domain name records and where we get our domain name servers from. I'm going to talk about those two terms as we do it. We'll just go step by step so that you get a good understanding of what's going on inside of here. So let me jump back into our Amazon Web Services right over here. And we're going to go back to the dashboard by clicking on the console home. And oh, you know what? Before I do that, there's one more step I want to do here inside of S3. I apologize. I completely forgot about it. It's a simple step, but it's pretty important at this point. Come on. Come on, Amazon. You got this. Whew. Come on, AWS. Give a page refresh here. All right, so here's our buckets. And I'm going to go to that one we've been working in, which I've called the oddcastshow.com. And so there's my files, but there's one step we need to do from the main area here. If we open up the properties again, right here where it says static website hosting, let's bring that down. And we're going to check off the option that says enable website hosting. And then we have the option as well of putting in what file should be served up when someone comes to our URL here. So we've only got the one. So we're going to say index.html. But this is a handy feature because maybe you would have a couple versions of your site, like an index 2 or index 3. And so by changing this option inside of here, you could change what gets served up to people when they arrive at the URL that we're just about to set up. So this step is pretty important for the next step that we're going to do. So check that off, put in the index.html, and we save it out. And now we're ready to jump into the next tool. So let's go back to the console. And what we're going to be looking for is this Route 53 down here. This is Amazon's domain name service. So if I click into here, I can see, you know, something newer that they're doing is like you can actually buy your domain name through here. I haven't done that before because I have another domain name solution that I like to work with that I've been really happy with over the years. But chances are this is pretty nice. But what we're going to do is go into the hosted zones here. Now inside of hosted zones, I've got like a few different sites that I'm running out of here. And I've already set up one for the Oddcast Show, but I'm going to get rid of that so we can go step by step because there's like 2 steps that you need to know about that can be a little bit confusing in this process. You see, the goal that we're after here is that we want to give the information to Amazon about our domain name and about this bucket that should be served up when this domain name is asked for. Now to do this, Amazon has a few servers where they store that information. Essentially, they are directing that URL to a certain IP that they know about. Now we're not going to need to know that IP because that's one of the benefits of this service is that you don't really need to know about the IP. You only need to know about the bucket that you have checked off that enable website hosting on. So that's kind of a benefit for us because keeping track of a lot of IPs can be kind of problematic. What we're ultimately going to get from this next step here is a list of the named servers where Amazon is keeping that information. We're then going to take that list and we're going to give it to the company that we have purchased our domain name from, with the instructions that whenever somebody types in this domain into their browser, when you go to look that up, just pass that lookup request along to Amazon because they've got the actual information. Now this is something that any domain name hosting solution has to allow you to do, because that's your domain name. You get to pick what name servers are being used for serving up that information. Chances are they provide some servers for your use in this regard. But we're going to switch it over to the Amazon ones, which are actually very robust and very quick compared to a lot of other solutions that you could find. So that's sort of the point of this next step we're going to do. So let's jump back into our Amazon Web Services. And to delete this, I actually have to go inside it and specifically delete this record right here before it will allow me to delete the whole hosted zone that I've created. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go back to the hosted zones. You probably won't need to do this deletion because you'll be starting with a fresh hosted zone here. But I want to do it just so you can see this step by step. Okay, so that's gone. So to get started, the first thing, usually the first thing we do is hit the big blue button. So I'm going to go create hosted zone right here. And in the domain name, I'm going to put in the domain that I have purchased. So podcastshow.com. And what you don't want to do is put any like HTTP or www or anything like that. It's just going to be the domain name. And you'll notice that this also matches up how I named my bucket in the earlier step. So I'll go create. And it does some work for us. So first off, I'll point out these guys right here. Those are the name servers that I've been mentioning we are going to need to actually hook up our domain name. This is where Amazon is storing the information, but right now it doesn't actually have the endpoint yet, which is our bucket. So to set that up, we're going to have to create at least one record set. Now you can see up here, it's automatically highlighted the next step here by making it the blue button. And if I click on this, over here on the right, we have the option to create the record set. Now the first thing it allows us to do is set the name. So if you wanted to create something like a, maybe like a subdomain or something like that here, let's say you want to have a developer version of this site, this is where you could set up a record set for something like dev.yourdomain.com. I'm not going to do that here. This is just a simple demo. I don't really need that, but it's nice to know that you can do that if you wish. You can add as many record sets to this hosted zone as you wish, which is kind of another benefit of Amazon. I've been very, very happy with their services over the years. All right, so let's get back into it. And so I'm going to leave that alone so that the record I'm creating is just for the domain itself. And the main trick to this is you have to check off this little checkbox that says alias. We're creating an alias record here. I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I click inside of alias target here, you can see that it automatically already knows about any sites that I have inside of my S3 buckets, which is fantastic. So I can check this off. And that is now the endpoint that matches the bucket I set up inside of S3 in the earlier step. It's that easy. You have a few other options in the routing policies. If you want to learn about those, that's kind of a bigger question. These have to do with being able to route traffic, for instance, to areas that are geographically close to them, which can be a benefit. Or rerouting traffic. If one of your sites goes down, you can automatically redirect people into another server. Lots of cool options like that, but we don't really need it for what we're doing today. We just want to get our site up and line and running. So I'm going to hit create. And just like that, we have what we need to direct a custom domain name into our site that is hosted. So we'll basically be going from, the URL like this, which has this s3.amazon AWS, basically down to just the domain name that we are using. And so for me, that's going to be oddcashshow.com. Now, to do this, we're going to have to go outside of our Amazon Web Services. You may be able to do this inside of Amazon now if you've purchased your domain with their solution. Previously, they didn't sell domain names, so I can't speak to that. I haven't done it. I'm going to show you the solution that I use by going over here to a place called dinedns.org. And I've been really happy with these guys. Let me sign in, and I'll give you a little tour of this. Okay, so the area that I'm looking for is my zones and domains. This is where it lists out any of the domain names that I have purchased through DynDNS. So let's jump into there. And here's the one that I'm after, oddcashshow.com, which I've had for quite a while. So buying your domain name with DynDNS is a little bit more expensive, but it has a few features that are not available with less expensive purchasing solutions. So the way that this stuff works, the way domain names work, is that there are basically head servers around the world that store all the information about all the domain names and match them up with IPs. If we were just using those head servers every time someone typed into their browser, it would get extremely slow. So the way the technology works is that the information from those head servers is cloned or mirrored out to mirror services, and then those mirrors are mirrored again and so forth, out. And so the further that you get from the head servers, basically the less robust that domain name service is. And this sort of accounts for the pricing difference usually that you see in domain names. There's more to it, but in a nutshell, that's basically what's going on. DynDNS is a little bit more expensive because they are located at a head server. And so the benefit of this is that when I point my domain name at a set of name servers, it propagates very, very quickly. Usually within about 10 minutes, it's connected. With a less expensive solution, it might take longer than that. It could take 24, I've seen it take 48 hours for the propagation to take place because the information is having to make its way up through all these mirrored solutions to a head server, and then from a head server out to all the other mirrors, which can take, a fair amount of time. Now, I like to pay a little bit more so that this process is faster, simply because if a client comes to me, I don't want to, tell them that they have to wait an undetermined amount of time, like 24 hours, for us to go to their backup solution. I want to be able to do that and have it like almost instant. Now, one word of caution, even with a domain name service like DynDNS, you're not going to really be able to change these up all of the time, like multiple times per day. That's not what this solution is intended for. If you're doing that, they will start slowing you down. Yesterday, I changed it several times and definitely I started to see some slowdown. But if you're just changing it once in a while, the propagation will be almost instant with this solution, which is a really, really nice thing for peace of mind. So let's get down to the business of actually hooking up our site in here. I'm going to jump back into DynDNS, and I'm going to go into the Oddcast Show's domain registration right here. And here you see the name servers listed out, and I have the option to edit name servers. Now, this will be somewhere in whatever domain name solution you have purchased. They all will look a little bit different. This is where I find it in DynDNS, but you might have to hunt around a little bit or ask support how you can edit the name servers. But once you find the option, it should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to go back into Route 53, and here's where I need this information. So I'm going to copy these name servers. Copy those, and be careful because you do need everything, like even this last little dot here, you're going to need that. And then we're going to go back into the area where I can edit the name servers with my domain company. And right in here, this now becomes editable. And I can paste those name servers right into here and save it with the Save Name Servers option. Now, if you're looking carefully, you'll see what I was talking about. We get this little message here saying, the name servers are updated. Please allow up to 24 hours for changes to propagate. So even with DNS, they suggest that it could take 24 hours. I've had this service for quite a long time, and I've rarely seen it take more than 10 minutes for the changes to propagate and be visible. So if I go and jump into that URL right now, well, there you go. It's already up and running, right? Which is pretty fantastic. And that is pretty much all there is to it. Now, something I didn't get to show in class is there is potentially a small little problem here. If we go www.oddcastshow.com, then it breaks, right? And the reason why is because this www actually makes it a different URL. Typically today people realize that they don't really need to put the www on there anymore, but there are still a lot of links floating around out there that have it in there. And it's still pretty common for people to put that in. And, we don't want to have this situation where just because they put the www, this site is unreachable. So to fix this up, we're going to go back into Amazon S3, and I'll show you one more little trick that we can do. So let me bring up my Amazon services again. And we're going to jump out of Route 53 back into S3, and I'll show you how to fix this situation. Okay, so we've got a bucket called the oddcastshow.com, and we saw that that URL works just fine. Now, to cover the www situation, we're going to have to actually create a bucket that includes that in the name. So www.oddcastshow.com, and we'll put it in the same region. It doesn't have to be in the same region, but we'll just do it that way, and we'll create it. Now, this bucket, we're not actually going to put any files in here. So we're not going to get into, trying to duplicate our files between Oddcast Show and www.oddcast show. We don't want to do that. But if you were watching carefully inside of our static website hosting here, we have an option that says redirect all requests to another host name. So if we check that off, you can see that it's been smart and it has already guessed that we probably want to redirect any www request just to oddcastshow.com. So that's pretty great. So let's save that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So when requests come in now that are aimed at www.oddcastshow.com, it's basically just going to automatically redirect them to the other bucket we have set up. And so that'll cover that situation. That is something that can trip you up if you're not being careful. Yeah, so that is pretty much it, guys. We've pretty much covered all the scenarios here. And this is a really, really nice solution. I really encourage you to try it out. You can't go too far wrong with AWS. It is far and away the #1 web services solution. Basically, Amazon created it for themselves, and then they realized that, hey, there's good business in selling these services to other people that want to use the same stuff that we use. And in time since there are other solutions for this, like Google has a solution, Microsoft has their Azure services, which are also very, very good. But Amazon probably has a little bit more robust offerings still. You can use any of them. They all have versions of this that you can do. If you want to explore the others, then feel free. But this one will definitely work and work very well for you. So if you want to get into using web services, then this is a really good place to start. So I will wrap it up there, guys. And I'll just let you know that Mike and I have been in the lab and we have been working on a new module, which is going to be on doing animation inside of HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So adding some nice animated touches to the interfaces that you're building is something that I think a lot of people are interested in. It's pretty cool stuff. We start from the basics of just doing transitions and things like that inside of pure CSS, right up into hooking up interactive animations that can be triggered through frameworks like Angular. So keep an eye out for that. That'll be going up on the Oddly Studios CodePen site with all of the other learning materials that you can find there. And let us know if there's something in particular that you're really interested in seeing how to do, and we'll see if we can fit it into the curriculum. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I will see you soon.